So today I'm going to be covering a highly requested topic lately with some dude's going to be helping me. What's your name again, bro?
Oh, the disrespect. It's TG, your Thunder God. Hello. Thank you for having me on the channel again.
This guy's been suggesting to both of us to cover the idea of swapping out the Hokage or in the event of the Uchiha massacres, is swapping out everyone with Hiruzen. And we've thought this is pretty interesting because it's kind of like a different type of thing where we usually when we swap
Yeah.
out the Hokage, it's about fighting. Now we're actually going to be talking about politics, which is technically like the Hokage job description. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into the parameters and just get into, how this challenge is going to work. But before I get into that, I want to get into this video's sponsor. Honkai Star Rail is a new multi-platform space fantasy RPG from Hoyoverse, who are the makers of Genshin Impact. It's a free cross-platform RPG that can be played on PC, mobile, and just recently it's been added to PS5. And there's data sync for every single device, so you don't have to worry about losing your progress if you decide to start playing on a new device. And this game is a global hit, so much so that it's gained 80 million downloads within its first 6 months of release. And that's because there's so much to this game. Firstly, it's a space adventure. As a trailblazer, you can explore different worlds across the universe and immerse yourself in an adventure filled with impeccable animations and music. In terms of gameplay, it's a new turn-based experience. The game is easy to pick up, but yet at the same time it's highly tactical. It allows you to conjure up unique team lineups and strategies according to context, such as enemies, environments, characters, and more. In terms of characters, there's over 30 playable characters, each with their own unique personality, backstory, and charm. In terms of the world, it's a rich semi-open world experience. You can search for treasure chests, you can solve puzzles, you can explore an NPC story, and uncover the secrets of the world. There's a lot of content in this world to be discovered. And Honkai Star Rail has been adding all types of new in-game content recently, such as they've added a new limited-time 5-star character called Huohuo. She may be a delicate girl, but she has a bright, conspicuous tail that seemingly has a mind of its own. So while her appearance may be delicate and her personality is very introverted and easily frightened, her tail, on the other hand, is very conspicuous and seems to be sentient by itself. In terms of in-game combat, she's a wind-type support character on the path of abundance. Besides restoring her allies' health, she can also provide ATK and energy buffs for her teammates. They've also added another limited-time 5-star character called Argenti. Argenti's your classic silent gentleman. He's a debonair knight who does not speak, because when he does, you can't help but laugh. In terms of in-game combat, he's a physical type character on the path of erudition, with exceptional AoE attacks. He primarily attacks with a spear, and his abilities have special rose effects. Such combat effects are just as magnificent as his appearance. In general, there's also a new version 1.5 game update. In this update, you'll be able to get a chance to go on a ghost-busting mission with Gunafun and Huohuo. Also in this update, you'll also get to try out a new 4-star character named Hanya. She's a physical type character on the path of harmony who can restore her allies' skill points to a certain extent. Xianso's new story will also have an all-new map release called Fikestroll Garden. Silver Wolf, who's the popular member from the Stellaron Hunters, will also return for players to pull for. So with all that being said, what are you waiting for? If you log in for 7 days, you'll get 10 free Star Rail special passes, and you can use them to draw Huohuo or Argenti. I also have redemption codes in the description if you want to redeem 50 Stellar Jade to spend in-game. I'll also have a download link to the game in the top of the description as well. So now that you know that everything you need for this game is in the top of the description, let's resume with the video now. So we're going to be putting each Hokage in Hiruzen's position right after the Nine Tails attack, since that's been heavily insinuated when the idea of like an Uchiha coup started, and we kind of got this like serious feuding between the Uchiha and the Leaf Village. So it's just going to resume right after the Nine Tails attack, and they're going to have to deal with the certain sequence of events that kind of led up to the Uchiha massacre. So, for example, right after the Nine Tails attack, the Uchiha quarter got moved to the outskirts of the village, and that really kind of started the coup idea with the Uchiha. And they also will see how they deal with like other events with like Itachi and Shisui kind of reporting the Uchiha are thinking of a coup, what's going to happen when Danza takes Shisui's eye, stuff like that. If it does get to that, what are they going to do when attack is imminent? Things like that. So it's basically just ignore like time and any type of it obviously doesn't make sense that Hashirama would be Hokage during this time, but we're just trying to keep everything constant, and here's his position since everyone kind of flames Hiruzen for, failing in this problem. So we want to see, how would the other Hokage deal with this problem if they had the exact same circumstances? So we're trying to determine how much of a failure Hiruzen was.
Yeah, yeah. And something I want to add real quick is that don't focus on the strength aspect of this. We're more so looking at how the Hokage would handle the political side of things. Like, what's the kind of like their approach to the political game and stuff like that. For everybody who's going to be like, oh, A character solos, all of the, like, none of that. Like, we're more so looking at these characters in government. That's what we're trying to get at.
Yeah, it's not going to be a matter of like the Uchiha are going to be scared of Hashirama, so they won't even think of like rebelling. This is like we're kind of thinking to the point where if it gets to where it did originally, where like the Uchiha don't even care, they're just going to rebel no matter who they're facing. And again, kind of the idea is the worst possible outcome is going to be rebellion, as that was said in the story, that would have caused a world war. So that's the worst possible outcome for any of the Hokage. The next worst possible outcome is the Uchiha massacre for obvious reasons. It's kind of like the lesser of two evils between that and a world war. And then the best possible outcome is some type of peace, no matter how they kind of accomplish it. Just as long as they avoid the massacre or world war, we're going to consider that a W. So before we get into just going 1 through 7 with the Hokage in this scenario, I just wanted to quickly explain how Danzo and the Elders, they aren't just like some people you can just like straight up say no to, and it wasn't like Hiruzen just being a pushover. They actually have a lot of political power. Of course, we do know that Danzo is basically the head of the Anbu, more or less, and the Elders have a lot of the political power too. Like they're actually politically appointed to their positions, and we see after Pain's attack in the Leaf Village when Tsunade's in a coma, the Elders call a meeting with the daimyo. And during that meeting where you have like all the leaders of the Leaf Village there, it's the Elders and Danzo that are completely leading it the entire time. Even the daimyo, he kind of chimes in from time to time. He asks questions, maybe he points something out. But for the most part, it's clear that the Elders are kind of leading the village without an Hokage at that time. And just generally, it's clear that, as we saw with Tsunade, where she bent to them time and time again, Hiruzen bent to them time and time again. It's not going to be just as simple as just telling them no or just telling them, I don't care what you say. They actually have a lot of power. And that's going to be problematic for each of the Hokage. Going ahead and starting off with the first Hokage, Hashirama, he's going to have to start off with dealing with the problem of the other elders wanting to segregate the Uchiha right after the Nine Tails attack. So in this scenario, we can kind of look at what some of the things that Hashirama did when he was Hokage to understand what he's going to do here. I would say that Hashirama was someone that was very easily guided by Tobirama at points in his tenure as Hokage. So we know that when the Leaf Village was just starting and they were trying to figure out, who's going to be the leader, Tobirama is the one that says, okay, we need a Hokage. And Hashirama says, well, why don't we make Madara Hokage? And then Tobirama instantly overrules them, and Hashirama just kind of goes with it. We also see during the first Kage summit, it's more so like Tobirama was leading the first Kage summit than Hashirama almost, as we see that.
Yeah.
Tobirama is the one that tells Hashirama, we need to distribute the tailed beast as a way to create like a balance of power. And they have to pay us money for it. And even Hashirama was like, are we sure they have to pay us money? And then Tobirama kind of bitches them right after that. So Hashirama, as passionate he is about the village, it's clear that he kind of lets, I guess, Tobirama take the reins at certain points. And Danzo and the Elders are very much like Tobirama. So it may be a very similar case in this segregation problem where I think that he may say like, oh, that would be a terrible idea. Just push the Uchiha to the outskirts of the village. But in this scenario, I do think that Hashirama would probably let himself get overruled, kind of like Hiruzen did.
Yeah, and we were kind of discussing too how there's also like a potential like alternate interpretation where Hashirama might also just fight for the Uchiha a lot more. So we do see this, that when it comes to the Uchiha clan and Madara specifically, Hashirama kind of puts his foot down with Tobirama. So you see this when Tobirama's like, yo, let's just clean Madara up, kill him, and then Hashirama's like, bro, back up. You kind of moving up a little too much. So he kind of bitches Tobirama there. And even when we see them come back as Edo, he because we do know that Hashirama, even as Edo Tensei, he like when Tobirama yells at him, he gets all gloomy and stuff like that. But the minute the Uchiha clan comes involved and he finds out that Tobirama kind of took a certain approach with them, he gets angry at Tobirama. He's like, yo, how many times did I emphasize not to slight the Uchiha? So there is a bit of an idea to where Hashirama has a bit of loyalty to the Uchiha clan as a founding clan to the Leaf Village, and just due to Madara himself. So we were talking about this. I was actually of the opinion I think he fights for them a little bit more than like maybe some of the other Hokage due to that. Another example of this is that Sasuke, when he comes to talk to the Hokage, literally shows off his, EMS and says, I want to destroy the village. Tobirama sees this threat and he wants to kill Sasuke. Hashirama, despite hearing this, is very intent on negotiating with Sasuke and easing his will because he doesn't want another Madara to come about. And that's something I will say I think he might take into account here. And even he talks to Madara when discussing with him. He's like, we don't need another you coming about. Even if it's not now, it's going to be in a future generation, which is something he was thinking about, which obviously Tobirama wasn't. So I was of the opinion, when the Uchiha clan comes to about, Hashirama does have a sense of loyalty to them, whether in regards to his friend or just due to the fact that they were founding members or that them and the Senju aren't different, however you want to slice it.
Yeah, and so we kind of split off two outcomes here. So we can say with, my outcome, I think that, Hashirama gets overruled by Hiruzen, although he puts up a better fight. For TG's outcome, if, Hashirama is able to avoid the segregation due to, like, probably his popularity and his, how passionate he is about this and things of that nature, then that basically he wins the challenge at that point because it's been heavily implied that this segregation was what started the coup. And maybe, the Uchiha are still kind of mad because they don't have that much political power at that point. But for this challenge, we'll say, rebellion is totally avoided. We don't have to worry about a coup. And maybe in the future, he has to, he gives them some political power. But for the scenario where the segregation does happen, we still think that Hashirama is most likely going to be able to kind of find a peaceful solution to this. So if we jump all the way down to the point where like Shisui tries to use Kocho Matsukami, but then Danzo stops him, and then attack becomes imminent, we do think that Hashirama is going to be able to talk them out of this. Because even when Itachi told the elders that the attack was almost imminent, Hiruzen responds by saying, well, let's not resort to a massacre just yet. I'm going to go and try to talk to him. And obviously that talk was a failure. But in this scenario, I think the Hashirama would be very passionate. That would betray his whole idea of a village system, that he would have to kill a fellow founding member of the elite village. And he would, at that point, if there's any doubts about his ability to kind of override the elders, there would be no doubts in the situation. And he would do whatever it takes to like get the Uchiha to not rebel, whether that be like putting someone on the council with Danzo and the elders, or whatever, moving the Uchiha district back to like the center of the elite village, whatever else that may be. As long as the Uchiha are not past the point of like no return at all, we think the Hashirama definitely pulls off a peaceful solution.
A side comment I want to add in too is that even after Madara goes on his like vendetta against the Leaf Village, you see that even like at the beginning of their fight and the end of it, Hashirama is still trying to find that peaceful solution. You know what I mean? Like he's still not fully intent on it. And obviously, that's Madara, but still, it's kind of like when he's pushed to the brink, he's still willing to work with these characters. So I think that just goes to show and like add on to what you were talking about. That it's really not going to happen with Hashirama around.
So either way, maybe he avoids the segregation, maybe he avoids it at the last second. Either way, we think that based off of, this is the one thing that Hashirama is super passionate about when it comes to being Hokage, it seems. So he's going to be able to avoid it.
Next up, we have Tobirama. Now, obviously, we all know Tobirama is a pretty big fan of the Uchiha clan. Now, I will say, starting off, we kind of did get a bit of insight to Tobirama in terms of like what he thought about the Uchiha massacre, and he was honestly pretty impartial to it. He just pretty much said, the fact that they self-destructed and went out was inevitable. We couldn't really do anything about it. And this obviously did not sit well with Hashirama, but the fact that Tobirama really had no issues with it, I think is a bit telling to his character and his approach to the Uchiha. Now, the thing about Tobirama is that he had a lot of knowledge about the Uchiha, how the Sharingan worked fundamentally. Obviously, Madara gave him PTSD on like several different levels, but he was correct about them. Where Tobirama went wrong was his policies, which are cited multiple times to have been inefficient in the cause for the Uchiha gradually becoming more disconnected for the rest of the village. And even the policies themselves weren't that big of a deal, but the fact that Tobirama didn't see the bigger picture, or the fact that Tobirama in his own mind, as he quotes, like didn't think it was a problem, I think is pretty telling. You could maybe argue that's like a lack of forward thinking, or just in terms of the Uchiha, or he was so fearful of Madara that it kind of led to this approach. And, as opposed to Hashirama, who, despite having that power, didn't really like have the same views. And I know I mentioned that Sasuke example earlier, but the fact that Tobirama also had no qualms about killing the actual very last of the Uchiha clan, I think is also very telling, very telling. He doesn't really respect the Uchiha to the same degree as Hashirama, despite them being a founding ninja clan for the Leaf Village. We don't really think he fights for the Uchiha as hard as Hashirama. He'd probably be very quick to actually eliminate this problem. And we think he'd be pretty impartial to like the whole Uchiha massacre. We're not saying he's advocating for it, but if push comes to shove, we do think that he would be willing to go to that degree.
I guess, some people that kind of debate or try to push that Tobirama is not like a Uchiha hater or whatever, he actually really cares about the Uchiha. That doesn't even really matter, just because, like, whatever he tries is probably not going to work. So, for example, when Hashirama and Orochimaru are like, well, when you created the Uchiha police force that already kind of like ostracized them and, separated them some from the village, and Tobirama just responds, well, I thought they'd be really good at that. I was trying to like help them out. So even if like he is, totally for the Uchiha existing, he's not going to be able to, enact the right policy to help that. He's probably just going to hurt it at that point.
Honestly speaking, though, if it does get to the massacre, I could see a situation to where Tobirama jumps in. I'm not gonna lie, like he might actually
100%.
join in on the fun. He might actually get in on the action. To be real with you, it's messed up to say, but when you really look at it, this dude, like, if they're going out anyway, he might as well enjoy himself for a little bit,
Nah, it'd definitely be hilarious, like, at the last minute where, like, he sends Itachi to do it, and then he's like, you know what, I'll hop in and help the boy out or something. And then he runs into, like, Obito, and Obito's, like, claiming to be Madara. So, like, in the middle of the Uchiha massacre, like, Tobirama's like, let me run the ones with you real quick, and then finish up, exterminating this clan.
They're gonna collab on the Uchiha massacre, bro. It's just not much to say on that. And obviously memes, but we couldn't do this video and not joke about the Tobirama being racist. We couldn't. It's too much fun. You know what I'm saying?
So next would be Minato, and this is the only Hokage here, like I said at the beginning, just to avoid, like, the concept of time and plot holes with, swapping out all the Hokage. This is the only one where we can actually do like a regular timeline or like a timeline split. But we wanted to do two scenarios for this, because the problem with, I guess, like the difference with Minato, if we do like this is like an original timeline split, is that he can just say, which makes this challenge too easy. He can basically just say to the elders, well, it wasn't any of the Uchiha, it was some dude claiming to be Madara Uchiha. And then at that point, if he comes like and tells all the Jonin in the village, there's no way that the Uchiha can be segregated, because everyone's going to know that it was not, someone of the current Uchiha clan. In that original scenario, like, at first we kind of thought that'd be really fun to talk about, but it's just too easy, because he's going to be able to actually explain himself. In this scenario, he's going to be able to avoid the segregation very easily, and there's no challenge after that. So the one we're really going to be talking about is that's not on the table, or if you just want to say, well, he's just not going to tell anyone, or we're just going to restrict that information for this. So starting with the segregation problem, I would like to go ahead and just kind of talk about like what Minato was probably like as a Hokage, because we don't really know anything about his policy since he was only around for 2 years, but we do know a lot about his ideals compared to some of the other Hokage. And he actually has a more apathetic, I guess, view on the political system than some of the other people on this list. So, for example, when he was talking to Naruto after or during his fight against Pain, I guess he's kind of explaining like the cycle of hatred, and he's like, yeah, the shinobi system's pretty messed up. And Naruto's like, well, what am I supposed to do about it? And Minato says, I don't know. That's for you to find out. So that kind of shows, and even like after, he finds that Obito was alive in the war and was like doing the, Shinobi war, he kind of like, again, was kind of apathetic and just kind of lost. So he is not. He's definitely idealistic. Believes in the will and fire and stuff like that. Believes, when he was dying, he's like, I'm self-sacrificing for all of the villagers. But there's that
Yeah.
element of kind of like, I don't know what the solution is to a political problem. Like, the Uchiha is certainly like part of the cycle of hatred that Pain talks about. So personally, I think that for, when it comes to the segregation problem with this kind of cycle of hatred, like he would certainly see this where he would see like, this is bad. This is just going to make the Uchiha hate us even more. But Hiruzen saw the same thing and he still ended up getting overridden. I kind of see the same thing happening with Minato here, where he may push harder, but in the end, he's kind of just is going to throw his hands up in the air and say, "Well, that's the Shinobi system for you. I don't know what to do about it." But if this does proceed to the point where like Shisui dies and an attack is imminent, I do think that more than likely he's going to fight harder than Hiruzen.
Something I will add to that differentiates Minato and Hiruzen is that Minato is very forward thinking. You do see this with, in he's preparing a lot for the future, especially from a very young age. You see this with like his plans, and he seals Kyuubi inside Naruto, him and Kushina's chakra. You also see this when he's like fighting Fourth Raikage A and Killer B, and that he likes he likes the Fourth Raikage and Killer B due to their mindset and how they are as shinobi and like people. That's obviously important because A is going to be Raikage and he'll have a big influence over the future and stuff like that. So you do kind of see how he acts with these bigger players and leaders in the political realm, and that he is able to recognize. It's like game recognizes game, but he is able to find like similar types of shinobi. And obviously, fourth, the A kind of caps off and becomes isolated, which is why the whole rift between A and B starts. But that's before that, obviously. So I think there is something to that.
Yeah, just to kind of add off of that, if we do get in a scenario where Itachi says the Uchiha are going to attack very soon, as we saw, Hiruzen did try to talk to them and fail. We think that Minato probably has like a higher possibility of trying to, concede power and, probably try and get an Uchiha on the council, whatever else, to try to just kind of avoid a rebellion. But I do think that, this may be an unpopular opinion. I do think that Minato would choose Uchiha Massacre if he's not able to get to a peaceful solution. As, when he was dying, he says, I'm self-sacrificing myself because I'm not going to let the world, fall into war, which is kind of like the similar situation with Itachi, with what he did in the Uchiha Massacre. I do think that the Uchiha Massacre is on the table for Minato. We just think that it's more likely that he might be able to convince the Uchiha, especially since like we see like people like A respect the hell out of Minato, and A is like one of the most rigid people in the series. So we'll say that rebellion is not on the table for Minato in this challenge, but Uchiha Massacre is probably the more unlikely scenario, probably mostly unlikely scenario. Most likely he is able to reach a peaceful solution, but only when it comes down to crunch time, not when it comes down to segregation like years prior.
So next up we have Tsunade. Now Tsunade is weird because we're gonna talk about this, that we kind of briefly touched on it, that she does have a couple interactions with the elders and Danzo that do give us some insights at how she acts. I will say though, Tsunade is very similar to Hashirama and Hiruzen. That's actually a big reason why Danzo doesn't even like her, is just due to the fact that she had adopted Hiruzen's ideology. Whereas, he obviously has that very bleak, wherever there's light, darkness has to be cast, which is a common theme throughout the series. So I will say, I could definitely see her taking an approach similar to Hiruzen. But at the same time, like, she's obviously more, I don't want to say hot-headed, but there's more spark to her. You know what I mean? Like, Hiruzen obviously has a bit of loyalty that, like, kind of to Danzo that made it so he'd work with Danzo. Obviously, they had fought in a world war together. They knew each other since kids. He was obviously very necessary. Tsunade doesn't really have that. So even though she adopted Hashirama's Will of Fire and is very similar to Hiruzen, I don't know if I would necessarily see her scenario going exactly the same, just because of how much she actually detests Danzo and like his methods.
Yeah, so I definitely think that she's would be more successful than Hiruzen, because we did see, like, for example, there are times when she's not successful. So, like, for the Tenchi Bridge arc, when the elders become aware that Naruto is having trouble controlling the Nine Tails, they're able to persuade Tsunade into adding Sai to the team, despite how much she hated that. But then during like when Pain first invades the village and she wants to recall Naruto, she actually picks up the elders by the neck and just tells them off, and then the elders just say, "Well, do as you please." Tsunade was the most difficult one for us to kind of figure out what she was going to do, despite us seeing we probably see the most interactions between her and the elders, compared to the other people. But in terms of segregation, we think that more than likely or most likely that's going to happen, because if the elders are able to convince like the daimyo and like the other, leaders of the village that the Uchiha did the Uchiha massacre, she can't really do anything about that. She's going to get overridden, just like Hiruzen was overridden in the original timeline. But we do think that because she did kind of stand her ground when, it was crunch time against Pain, if it's crunch time when Itachi says that the Uchiha are about to rebel, it's likely she may be able to find a peaceful solution. But then again, she's not as much of an idealist or talker as like Minato, Hashirama, or Naruto, so she might just end up fail despite having very good intentions.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. Like, she may value the Uchiha clan like in a similar capacity to Hashirama, or like respect their contribution to the village. So she might fight harder than I think she would fight harder actually than Hiruzen and Tobirama, obviously. So there is something there. Maybe you could also argue like the leeway with like Sasuke and whatnot, although I was obviously influenced by Naruto. Something interesting with the segregation point, I will say though, I actually think that her being a Senju would probably just make the segregation a bit worse than anything. The fact that they're also just kind of being like inhibited by this like Senju Hokage is like, it's like another like little like blow like to their pride, or if you want to kind of argue that, just like another added bonus to the Uchiha and how like they've fallen from like equals to the Senju clan. So there's a couple different ways to look at it, but I agree with what you said.
With Tsunade, we're a bit unsure about the outcome compared to the others, but we think the likeliest outcome would probably be peace. If she's, at the very last second, she's going to go to the Uchiha and give them like a seat on the council and whatever else. But then again, she may, like I said, she's not as much of an idealist or talker as like Minato or Hashirama. So she might just not be able to do that. Or if she like blows up in the Uchiha, like she blew up on the elders, that would be like even worse.
Yeah.
So we're kind of not sure if she would rather prefer an Uchiha massacre or a peaceful solution, but more than likely we're going to say peaceful solution, but not by that much.
Something interesting is that she was also very willing to work with the Sand Village after their literal attempt on the Leaf, and obviously they became cool, but the fact that she immediately went to work to like kind of patch that rift that had appeared by assigning Team Gara Squad to go on the Sasuke retrieval mission, I think also does say something about her in her ability to kind of like maneuver the political realm as well. So, if she's able to kind of like start repairing that rift between villages, it may not be that extreme for her to kind of repair a leaf or the rift between like a fellow clan. That's just something to throw in. But
yeah, she definitely has the intent, because she definitely she's kind of taken on Naruto's will for as part of her kind of philosophy. But like our point is that in terms of execution, she just does not show like the ability to execute some of the other Hokage.
Next up, we have Kakashi. Now, we were like talking about this because this would be Hokage Kakashi, obviously. You assume that he kind of like has all this experience and stuff like that. I think you can look at what he did for Sasuke as a pretty decent example, since he was kind of able to swing it for Sasuke. Now, granted, Sasuke was pretty like literally instrumental in ending the Fourth Great Ninja War. They wouldn't have been able to do it without him. So, that did play into it, but it kind of does show he does have a great deal of influence in the political arena. I mean, I will say too, he was always on the table for Hokage, and even as a Jonin, like other village leaders respected him. Like the Fourth Hokage only gave Naruto the time of day just because he heard it was Kakashi. So that reputation also does help. I think there is something to that. He also has we were talking about this, he has this link with Obito that was shared with the Uchiha. So like we see in the anime, they actually refrained from taking Kakashi's eye back due to that being kind of like Obito Uchiha's will. So we also were of the opinion like there's probably that mutual link with the Uchiha and Kakashi. So we were definitely thinking that, we don't think Kakashi's going to be able to stop the segregation phase. Stopping that is definitely tougher. However, when it gets into like the negotiation phase and actually, having some of these Uchiha come to your side, we definitely think Kakashi would be able to negotiate with the Uchiha clan. And we definitely think he would have a great deal of respect on their end. What's your thoughts on Kakashi?
Yeah, kind of difference between like Kakashi in part 1 and the end of part 2 is like Kakashi in part 1 is pretty apathetic, and he's kind of just I kind of like I was talking about Minato, where like he doesn't really have answers. So like after Sasuke deserts at the end of part one, he goes to Obito's grave and he's like, well, things really haven't changed since you died, Obito, and things like that. So, but by the end of part two, like TJ said, he tells Sasuke, you're a free man. It did take considerable effort by my parts, and you were also fortunate that you helped in the Infinite Tsukiyomi. I mean, that just that kind of shows that Kakashi has conviction, and he also has the ability to put his foot down because he does say it did take effort to have Sasuke be a free man, for example. So in this scenario, more than likely he can't kind of swing like a segregation because if the elders convince everyone else the Uchiha did the Nine Tails attack, that's just too much for Kakashi to put his foot down for if it's not going to be like an imminent rebellion in that sense. But if this does kind of get down to the wire, or if it gets close to the wire, we do think that Kakashi is going to be able to put his foot down like he kind of did with Sasuke, and possibly even like Orochimaru and Kabuto, for example, since they're all walking free after the war, despite despite them all being international criminals. So most likely he is able to give them a seat on the council, move the Uchiha district back to the center of the village, things like that. Really, we see that more than likely peace is going to happen, like 90% chance. Maybe there's a small chance of like the Uchiha massacre happening if the Uchiha are just at a point of no return.
I fully agree, and just like the last added bonus, this also doesn't take into account any of the novel stuff with Kakashi because he's pretty heavily in the political game there too, and he has some great showings. But just off of like you can see with like his interactions with Itachi in the anime, he's very he kind of does have like that like mind and whatnot. He does have a lot of links to the Uchiha clan, so just pretty much agreeing like he just has a lot of ties to that clan, and we don't see it really going down to that like rebellion route that you were mentioning.
And then finally we have Naruto. So in the case of Naruto, we don't even think that this is going to get to the point of being segregated. Even if the elders try to convince everyone else the Uchiha did the Nine Tail attack, this is if anyone can convince anyone of anything, it would be Naruto, and certainly Naruto would not stand for any type of slighting in his own village, as he was very adamant about that, and many of the things that he said. So we also think that even if you want to say that the elders have a chance of overruling him, I just don't even think that's possible. Not even if you want to say this like plot armor or something, Naruto might just be so hugely popular that he's able to swing this, kind of like how we said like Kakashi's able to swing Sasuke being a free man. Naruto may be able to convince the other leaders of the village and whoever else, may even convince like the Uchiha to like kind of calm down or something. And just really, I think that he probably avoids segregation because of that, because it's just not something Naruto is going to stand for at all. Even if he allows the segregation and it gets down to like the wire, there's no way that Naruto is not able to like talk no jutsu to the entire Uchiha clan.
Something I'll add too is that we actually do see the elders are still around in Boruto. And Naruto actually went ahead and kept the fact that Mitsuki was Orochimaru's son a secret from them. And even though they were mad, like he didn't care. Like Tsunade was mad. He was like, bro, it doesn't matter. So he also doesn't really have like too many qualms about standing up against them, especially since, I mean, to be honest, they were partially responsible for some of the stuff in his life and whatnot. So, I will say like we kind of did see a little bit of this in the Boruto stuff. So if you want to take that, that's also just like, the extra like 10% on top of it.
Yeah, even like let's say for example, like this is an extreme case that kind of shows what Naruto is capable of. Like when he's going to find Nagato to talk to him, he gets confronted by a few Jonin, and even though he tells them that he knows where Nagato is, he's able to tell them to stay back despite like their entire village is being destroyed. And they're adamant on killing Nagato, and Naruto's still able to convince them that that's not the right solution. Now, maybe the elders are more stubborn in this case, but even so, we think that Naruto doesn't even need to convince the elders. If he convinces literally everyone in the village that this is a bad idea, we don't see the elders being able to overrule Naruto in this situation. Even if you want to kind of like take out, if we're saying that Naruto's popularity after the war is kind of eliminated from this, like we kind of said, even before the war, like in the Pain's invasion, he's still so like convincing and popular that, he's able to convince the other Leaf Jonin to not kill Nagato. So overall, we'll just go ahead and kind of summarize what all the outcomes we thought were, and then we'll just give like a final conclusion. So for Hashirama, most likely he might be able to stop the segregation. He might not be able to. We were, conflicted on that. But in the end, we do think that he's able to avoid the rebellion by, giving the Uchiha what they want, whether that's a seat on the council or whatever else. Very unlikely that an Uchiha massacre happens or like a full-on rebellion happens. As for Tobirama, we know he's all for the Uchiha massacre. He's gonna greenlight that immediately. And then Hiruzen we skipped because he was in the original timeline. For Minato, we said if this was the case where he survived the Nine Tails attack and he told everybody that this masked man did it, there's no way that any Uchiha massacre is going to happen because they won't be able to segregate the Uchiha away. There's no blame to put on the Uchiha for the attack. But if we do keep things constant, like with all the other Hokages, and he's not able to tell people about Obito, we think that most likely he's able to reach a peaceful solution at the last minutes. But we did kind of note that when talking about the curse of hatred and the flaws of the political system, he kind of puts his hands up at times in the series, so he may end up just resorting to an Uchiha massacre. And then with Tsunade, that was a very tough one. We think likely scenario, she negotiates with the Uchiha at the last minute, but there is also a strong chance that she allows the Uchiha massacre happens, or even Danzo kind of does that, orders that behind her back. And then for Kakashi, we thought that, very, very likely he's able to find peace at the last minute. Probably can't stop the segregation, but most likely since, he showed he put his foot down for people like Sasuke, and he's kind of inherited Naruto's will at that point in his life, that he's going to be able to talk them out of it and probably give them, some political power and whatever else they want at that point. And then, of course, with Naruto, like we said, that's the Tog no Jutsu God, and he's going to be able to do whatever he wants at that point.
It was a fun little discussion. Let us know what you guys think down below. We're obviously here, very curious to think what you said. If you agree, disagree, why, how you think each Hokage would, we definitely want to see some input on it, because we do think it's kind of a fascinating discussion and a little different to kind of look at these Hokage in that political realm.
So this is kind of a different type of topic. Usually we talk about if we swap out the Hokage, it's in a fight. So let us know if there's any other type of kind of more plots or political kind of swap outs you want to do for any type of group of people or whatever. I'm always open to ideas. TG's always open to ideas. Just remember, we're working with a lot of limited information when it comes to the Uchiha massacre. So this is our best estimations based off of what each of the Hokage has showed us.